everyone, welcome back to my booktube channel, Lisa in Bookland. As you might have noticed, I'm back at home where there are substantially more books and less light, so you can only have one or the other unfortunately while I am still living here. Because I did pick up one or two books in Cork, and I just, when I took some books off my bookshelf and tried to put them back on again, I actually rearranged all of my books. I didn't film it or anything because nobody needs to see that. It was me taking them as they already were vertically on the shelf, turning them around and then trying to wedge more books in the space that was left. So that wasn't a very interesting video. If I ever do get my library as planned, I'll film it then. Today I'm very excited to bring you my first ever Jane Austen July TBR. So Jane Austen July, I'd say, is at least 30% the reason why I joined BookTube, so I've been really looking forward to this month. And I have quite an ambitious stack of books lined up to read. I also have one or two things that aren't related to Jane Austen July on my TBR, which I will mention at the end. I should also mention that Jane Austen July is hosted by three lovely hosts who are Katie at Books and Things, Marissa at Marissa Bookish, and Claudia from Spinster's Library, and I'll link all of their announcement videos down below. So I am trying to tick off all of the challenges, which are just really fun, and they do give you kind of a diverse selection of reading for the month. So the first challenge is to read one of Jane Austen's main 6 novels, and I'm going to be reading at least 2 of them. So the reason I've picked these 2 is I've read within the last year, I'd say I've read Mansfield Park, Persuasion and Northanger Abbey, and I would like to read them all kind of within a 2-year space to try and finalise my final rankings to see what I think, even though I'd say every time I read them I change my mind, apart from the top one, which is Persuasion, which I don't think any of the others will ever tip off its pedestal. I often read Jane Austen from this big bind up that I have, but I actually have individual copies of these to read for both of these 2 books. So I'm going to read Pride and Prejudice along with the read along. I haven't read this in a while, so I'm really looking forward to it, and it is probably in my top 3. It's a great book and I love this edition that I have. It has some full colour illustrations which are lovely, so that's really nice. And I'm also going to read Sense and Sensibility because I think that's the one I've read the longest to go, so I'm really looking forward to what I think of that. I've not read Sense and Sensibility as much, probably twice, and I definitely think I'll enjoy it better this time. So the second challenge then is to read something by Jane Austen that's not one of her main 6 novels, and again I'm taking part in the read along of Lady Susan in this cloth bound edition, which confusingly is called Sanditon. Maybe it was released at the same time as the television series. So I'm going to read at least Lady Susan, which I've read once before and I didn't enjoy as much as her other novels, so but I wasn't as familiar with Jane Austen when I read it, so I think I might again enjoy it more this time. But if I have time as well, I would love to read Sanditon, because the last time I experienced Sanditon was from the television series, and I'd like to go back and see what the unfinished book was like. Even though I've never watched series 2 of Sanditon, it's not available conveniently over in Ireland, so if anybody has watched it, definitely let me know. I know it probably diverges from the book completely, but I'd love to know whether it's worth watching or not. So the third challenge then is to read a non-fiction about Jane Austen or her time. So I'm planning to read 2 books again at least for this. So the first book I'm going to read is Jane Austen, A Life in Small Things, which I've heard recommended many times. I've previously read Lucy Worsley's Jane Austen at Home, and I've also read Claire Tomlin's biography of her, so I think that this will be a nice kind of different take on it. And I know I read kind of a similar book about the Brontes once, which I really enjoyed, so yeah, looking forward to kind of revisiting Jane Austen's life in that form. So the second thing I'm planning to read, because I'm being a bit ambitious with this and I love reading about this period anyway, I wanted to read both a biography about Jane Austen and something about her time, so I'm going to pick up this book, A Time Traveller's Guide to Regency Britain, by Ian Mortimer, which I've heard many good things about. I've only read previously by Ian Mortimer his fiction book, but I know that Charlotte at Coyne Reads is a massive fan of this historian, so looking forward to checking this one out. And just from reading the first line or two, it seems to be kind of written in a really immersive kind of ways, I suppose the title would imply, but it says, as your ship approaches the south coast of England, you'll be looking out for land. If you're sailing from France, the White Cliffs of Dover may be in your sights for most of the crossing, and hopefully the whole book continues like that, because I think that'll be just a really unusual and fabulous way to write a non-fiction and might help things stick in your head a little bit better. So yeah, really looking forward to The Time Traveller's Guide, and I think he has the same one for like Victorian Britain, so I can pick that one up in Victober if I like it. So the next challenge is one which I always love hearing people's plans for what they're going to read, because there is kind of so much out there of varying interest, and that is to read a retelling of a Jane Austen book or a work of historical fiction set in Jane Austen's time. And I really like that the host added kind of that second bit to read a work of historical fiction. It especially suits me as I read so much in that time anyways. But yeah, so the first of all, I suppose, for the works of historical fiction, I'm actually planning a reread for this, and I'm going to read Patrick O'Brian, Mauritius Command, because I haven't read Patrick O'Brian for a while, and on the first Sunday of July I'm going up to Dublin for a match, and I'll be getting the train, and I just think it'll be a great one just to keep me occupied the way up and down. So yeah, really looking forward to delving back into this book. I've read the first 3 books in the series a reread a while ago, so this is the 4th book in the series. Again, I'm kind of rereading these series very, very slowly, just kind of when I feel like it, and these books always remind me of summer, because I read them kind of for the first time during like lockdown summers outside on the hammock in the garden. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to a reread of this. Like, I've so much underlined, and the first part I came across was like Stephen Maturin is going to house, and he can hear children screeching inside, and he said he's hearing domestic sounds within. The massacre of innocents came to mind. I merely left my offering on my horse and came along. He left straight away. He didn't want to get involved in that argument. But yeah, Patrick O'Brian is fabulous. It seems to be an often repeated comment of Patrick O'Brian that his writing style is very like Jane Austen, and I do agree. It might be worth a try if you like Jane Austen, if you can get past all of the nautical jargon, because he definitely doesn't hold back on that. But worthy read for Jane Austen July, I think. So then on to kind of more retellings, I suppose. So the first one, I've had this on my shelf for absolutely years. I picked it up in a second-hand bookshop in Galway. I remember picking it up, it must have been at least 10 years ago, and I've never read it. So it's called The Other Mr. Darcy. It's about Caroline Bingley, interestingly, and she seems to be kind of rescued from her despair by Mr. Darcy's American cousin, Mr. Robert Darcy. So yeah, we'll see. I'm not going to read this immediately after Pride and Prejudice. I'm going to read Pride and Prejudice at the start of the month, and then maybe kind of leave a cooling off period and then read this. Yeah, it's interesting that somebody thought to read and write a book about Caroline Bingley, whereas like you'd hope she's portrayed a little bit more sympathetically. So that will be interesting from that aspect, and I will be happy to have read this off my shelves. Final book I'm planning to read for this challenge is Miss Austen by Gill Hornby. I can't believe I've not read this yet. I believe that Gill Hornby has actually just come out with another kind of similar type book about Jane Austen's niece called Godmersham Park. So I'm behind already, but if I like this one, at least there'll be more waiting for me. So I suppose what's funny about this book is it doesn't really meet the prompt, because it's not in Jane Austen's time. It's actually about Cassandra, her sister, her older sister, Miss Austen, after Jane dies. So I think it starts in 1840. So of course, Cassandra Austen famously destroyed some of Jane's letters, which we often kind of get upset at her for because of the gaps it left in Jane's life. So I'll be dying to see if Gill Hornby kind of presents maybe a reason for that, or shows Cassandra's thinking. And yeah, I love this cover as well. I love embossed covers that have raised bits on them. It's nice. So yeah, Miss Austen, I'm finally going to get to read it. Oh, I actually forgot. I'm actually planning to read one more as well, but because I don't have the physical copy with me, I forgot about it. Which I definitely think I'll fit it in. I've ordered from the library, and that's Reputation by Lex Croucher, which I've heard so much about as well. It's supposed to be really fun. I don't actually know a huge amount about it. It always comes across as kind of just from the cover as kind of like Regency girls behaving badly, but I'm not sure if that's actually accurate or not, so don't take me at my word on that one. I keep saying it's the last thing and then I forget, and then I remember another thing I was planning to read, but the very last one I think for the Jane Austen retellings that I was planning to read is An Ever Fixed Mark, which is actually an online fan fiction by an author called AMarguerite. So Claudia at Spinster's Library was asking for recommendations for fan fiction. So if the host says it counts, it counts. And that is such a good fan fiction. And I actually read recently enough the kind of alternate fan fiction of that fan fiction by the same author. It's mad, called Italians with the Duke, which, you know, I enjoyed really so much, but I want to read the original again. So it's a fan fiction of that trope where there are soul marks on people's skin that kind of tell the person that people are supposed to be with, but like the author says in the summary, it's a kind of deconstruction of that trope. And the pairing is Elizabeth and Colonel Fitzwilliams. That's definitely different, though don't be frightened. You know, don't get freaked out by that. It so works, it definitely works. Elizabeth is written so well, and like the entire Regency period is captured really so well. You can tell the author really knows what she's on about. Especially a good read if you're kind of interested in the Napoleonic Wars. I can't say any more because I don't want to spoil it, but if you've kind of struggled with this prompt in the past, or you just are looking for something different and free, obviously, I'll put the link down below because it's absolutely brilliant. And yeah, would highly recommend. And of course, because it's a fan fiction, if you do read it, don't forget to leave a comment for the author, who has got back to me in the past and is very nice. And if you happen to enjoy that, she actually has other stories like A Dalliance with the Duke, like I mentioned, or she has a really excellent Persuasion one, which is unfortunately unfinished, but even if it's never finished, what's there is brilliant. So yeah, it's kind of Anne in Lyme Regis looking for fossils. What could be better? So the next book then is to read a book by a contemporary of Jane Austen. So the main thing I'm going to read for this is Marmion by Sir Walter I almost said Sir Walter Elliot. Sir Walter Scott. That's so funny. So I've read the rest of this book and I've enjoyed it. Like, it wouldn't really stick in your head. It's a book of kind of his ballads, so they're all seem to be like set around Scotland, as I think is the case with a lot of Scott's work. They, like, you know, they were just enjoyable to read aloud, I found, and just kind of really nice rhymes as well. Like, he did know how to write poetry. So yeah, I think Marmion is obviously one of his more famous ones, A Tale of Flodden Field. So yeah, I used to find them nice to kind of read before bed, just kind of a few pages at a time. So that's what I'll be reading to fill that prompt for Jane Austen July. So I kind of have a personal goal to read at least one thing Irish every month, which is, I suppose, a little bit harder to fulfill during Jane Austen July. I did have a kind of a good dig to see if there were any Jane Austen retellings that were written by Irish authors or something, and I couldn't find any. Or like, even I decided to go completely wild and see if I could find any Regency romances, but I couldn't kind of verify any that were written by Irish authors either. So if I managed to fit it in, I might reread Castle Rackrent by Maria Edgeworth from this collection. So I've read it before and I don't think I'll have time to fit in one of her longer novels that I haven't read, like Belinda or anything. So yeah, if I get to it, if I don't feel like it, or if I don't get to it, I'll just read something else off my shelves not related to Jane Austen. So that's just something to fit in. I also just thought it might be nice to read maybe one or two of William Cowper's poems, just because it was Jane Austen's favourite poet and I've never read anything by him. So just before we move on to the watching prompts, the two things I'll be reading that aren't related to Jane Austen July are Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead, which I'm reading on audiobook at the moment and I'm absolutely loving, so I'll be continuing on doing that. And also Olive, because I had a TBR to read something from the Victorian era every month. I was kind of tempted to move Vanity Fair up to this month because it's set in Jane Austen's time, But I'm really looking forward to that book, and I just thought I might get too distracted by everything else going on in Jane Austen July, so I'll put it off until next month as planned. So lastly, I suppose, to the watching prompts, there are two of these. So the first one is to watch a direct screen adaptation. So the obvious one for this is the new Persuasion that's coming out on Netflix. As I said before, Persuasion is my favourite Jane Austen. It's like my second favourite book of all time. I absolutely, and like a large part of the reason for that is the character of Anne. I just love her so much. And to see what they've done to her in the film is painful. I'm still going to watch it, and I'm just trying my best to like separate out kind of Persuasion the film from Persuasion the book, and just enjoy, or try to enjoy, the film for what it is, which is a bit difficult. So I'm going to watch that and see what I think of it. Well, I do have these three other options. So the main two I'm hoping to get to is because I have only seen them once, or I haven't watched them at all. I can't really remember them at all. Two of probably the lesser popular ones, definitely Mansfield Park. I've heard this is awful. But you know, I read Mansfield Park at the end of last year, so I just kind of want to see the adaptation and see what I think of it. And Northanger Abbey with J.J. Field. I have heard at least one person say good things about this, so yeah. So one good one and one maybe not so good one, we'll see. The third one I'm going to watch is Sense and Sensibility, the Emma Thompson one. I have watched this once, I think. Whenever I go for a Sense and Sensibility one, I always go for the BBC series, because I think that's so good. I really love that Sense and Sensibility adaptations. This is a bit different, but yeah, I especially in summer, I don't find myself watching much telly, so the films are easier for me, I think, than the television series. So then the second watching prompt is a modern screen adaptation or retelling of Jane Austen book. I'm planning to watch two things for this. Like I said, I'm being ambitious with this. We'll see how I get on. But again, this movie, Miss Austen Regrets, which I think I've only seen once before. It's about Jane Austen in older life, so it's not really retelling of her book. It's more of a like fictionalized biopic, and it's about her relationship with her niece Fanny, who she was very close to. And wrote lots of letters to and things, and also liked to write a little bit, so yeah, it'll be interesting to revisit this one. And also what I might get to is the web series Emma Approved. I've seen that just once. I've watched Lizzie Bennet Diaries loads of times. I'd like to revisit Emma Approved, and I believe there's even a second series, and I've never seen the second series, so yeah, I enjoyed it, not so much as Lizzie Bennet Diaries, but maybe I'll like it more on a reread. So that's it. That's all of my Jane Austen July plans. As you can tell, I'm really excited. I don't know how many Jane Austen July videos I'll be putting up. One I kind of have in my head. I don't know if it'd work at all like I think it would, so I might put out that one, we'll see. Sorry for being so vague. I just don't want to disappoint anybody if it doesn't happen. I'd love to make other videos like my ranking of my Jane Austen of the Jane Austen novels, but as I said, I'm putting that off. Or I love hearing people kind of talk about their favourite Jane Austen heroes or heroines, but again, I kind of like to reread them all first before I do that. But yeah, I can't emphasise enough how much I'm looking forward to everybody's Jane Austen July content. It used to be one of my favourite times of the year on BookTube, even before I started creating content. Earlier in the week I talked about July, and I called July Jane Austen July by accident. They were like, what on earth are you on about? Sorry, that's just me being excited about something that's happening online. So yeah, anyways, thanks for listening, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next Thursday for my next video.